What's up, comic book fans, and welcome to Comics Icons. Now, JJ, what they call me, and today we got something a little bit different with an icon from the world of Image Comics, the one and only Spawn. But before I jump into this one shot of Spawn's universe, I'd like to address the reason for my intro. Now, since the inception of this channel, most of you guys have received me with open arms, and I couldn't be more grateful. But I've had a few comments that, although they don't really bother me, I like to address. Some people don't like my improper use of English in my JJ what they call me opening. I've heard things like it's too hood or too ghetto, or somebody even went so far as to say that they want to puke every time they hear it. That one really made me laugh. And I hope you clean up after yourself whenever you do. But for you guys' information, the reason for it is that it's a tribute to one of my favorite all-time TV shows called Martin, another icon. It was an episode that he referred to an old high school adversary named Ricky Fontaine. Pretty Ricky, what they called him. Now, I know some of you guys still won't care, but I just wanted to address it anyway. I do, in fact, know how to properly speak. But truth is, I just think it's a fun line and it's not going anywhere. But with all that being said, it's time to get busy with Spawn's universe. Now, this isn't a brand new issue. It was actually released in 2021, but I wanted to start covering Spawn since he was one of my favorite characters growing up as a child. And starting here kind of beats starting at issue 1 of Spawn since it's approaching 350 issues. So in addition to Spawn's universe, I also plan on covering King Spawn, Gunslinger Spawn, and the Scorched. And if each of those videos do good, then we'll continue to cover each one of those series. And you guys can let me know if you want me to start at the beginning up until now and beyond, or just from now until beyond. Because those issues are a lot easier to catch up on than the original Spawn series. But without further ado, if you're a fan of this awesome character by Todd McFarlane and are ready to meet his allies, then you guys know what time it is. Let's get it. So this issue picks up after issue number 318 of Spawn, if you're wondering. But when the issue begins, it's 2 weeks prior, and we see Cogliostro standing at a dock alongside of his cat. Then we see that Cogliostro has been planning something, and he can't afford any disruptions to the plan, and everything needs to play out perfectly. He's then approached by a guy named Jericho along with his crew who wants Cogliostro to give up his cat. But when Cogliostro rejects his request, the cat still decides to jump at Jericho to protect Cogs, only to be shot down by Jericho. You see, Jericho had figured out that Cogs had been hiding his medicine that had been keeping him alive inside of the cat. And Jericho has been tasked with eliminating the old guard, and Cogliostro is a part of that group. So he retrieves the medicine, and then he throws Cogliostro over the dock to be transported to Omega Island. Then we transition to 2 weeks later and back in the current day, and Spawn is fighting off some creatures that appear human, but they are not. But these guys have been trapped on Earth because every dead zone portal had been locked, and now every demon or angel is stuck, and Spawn plans to flush them all out. So he tears through these guys pretty easily, and then he holds them over a rooftop seeking answers. He wants to know why these guys were gonna attack a woman. And at first they give him a lie, which he obviously doesn't believe. But then he threatens to drop these guys unless they tell him the truth. So they quickly admit that they weren't interested in her. They only wanted her papers. And these guys swear that it's the truth, to which Spawn believes, and he acknowledges as such. And then he drops them anyway. Then later on we get Spawn back at his hidden sanctuary with Mark Rosen, aka Medieval Spawn. And they're going over what they found in those papers that the lady had. And after looking at the information, Spawn realizes that the earthquakes that have been happening are likely intentional because someone on Omega Island is trying to mask their presence. And the conclusion he comes to is that Omega Spawn didn't die. Although Mark, he believes it to be something else, because Omega Spawn's energy signal is gone, but something there is giving nuclear plant type signals. So Spawn decides that he needs to go there, but Mark reminds him that he barely survived last time he was there, to which Spawn agrees, which is why he plans on taking Cygor with him. So when Spawn and Cygor get to Omega Island, They charge in, guns blazing, but almost immediately, they're met with this new player that is able to control the power of the island and freezes Spawn dead in his tracks. Then this guy thanks Spawn for getting rid of Omega Spawn, because although he had plans of being at the side of Omega Spawn, he acknowledges that Omega didn't seem to be aware of the opportunity to sit on Hell's empty throne. But this new guy reveals the chance to become the king, but first he needs Spawn to unlock the dead zones, to which Spawn refuses. So in turn, this guy takes control of Cygor and he makes him break Spawn's back. Now Spawn's body isn't like that of a normal human, so his back doesn't necessarily break, but he can still feel every single bit of that pain. Then this guy has Cygor bring Spawn to join the other prisoners on the island. So when we see them arrive at the compound, they're met with Jericho, who reveals that he and his superiors have decided to give their full support to this new guy, since he's done a great job since the disappearance of Omega Spawn. So he tells this guy that they believe that all the warring factions, the vampire, angels, and warrior clans, will band together under this guy's lead. And then when these guys get to the prison, we see that both Cogliostro and Gunslinger Spawn are the other prisoners. And at this point, Spawn has never met Gunslinger Spawn, but he knows Cogliostro very well. But then Jericho begins to torture Spawn, and he says to Spawn that, "You think you're the only ones that control necroplasm? We invented it, long before the first Hell Spawn ever walked. So, that energy coursing inside of you every day, that's ours. And we know how to kill it if we want." Then he locks Spawn up right next to Gunslinger Spawn, and then they leave them. But not before this new guy takes Cygor, to which Spawn calls him a bastard. And then this guy finally tells him that his name is Disruptor, and then he threatens to break Cygor's bones if he doesn't get his name right. So now that the prisoners are alone, Spawn asks Cogliostro how is it that he's there, because Omega said that he put him in a pit with no way to escape, and now magically you're here with this other Spawn. So he thinks that all of this is a trick by Cogliostro. But Cogs lets him know that it's not. Just ask Gunslinger if this is real. So now Spawn asks Gunslinger why he's there. If he fell through the hole, then why come here? Then Gunslinger reveals that he's here for Cogs because he's been playing tricks on Spawns for centuries. And if you guys are wondering about Gunslinger, he's a Spawn from the 1800s, but he was brought into the present through a rift in time that opened between heaven and hell. And this guy is also previously believed that he killed Cogs. But then he tells Spawn that the fact that Cogs is here today means that I didn't kill him back in my time. So either he got away from me back then, or I never got back in the first place. Both of those answers don't sit right with me. So this is where Spawn reveals to Gunslinger that he's actually the one that brought him there, albeit unintentionally, but he doesn't know how to reverse it. Then Cogs tells them both that he needs to show them something. But Spawn tells him that he doesn't care what he wants. So Cogs tells him anyway that it's a scar, but it'll have to wait. Then he tells them that he must leave because it's time he finished his puzzle first. And then Cogs goes absolutely bananas, and he starts screaming and yelling and just acting completely insane. So the guards, they come in and unlock his restraints to take him away, but not before Cogs steals one of Gunslinger's bullets. Then the guards take Cogs back to the pit and kick him back into it. Then we see Spawn telling Gunslinger to follow his lead, but Gunslinger tells Spawn, "I'm here because of you, so keep your majestic plans to yourself. I got my own." So then Gunslinger starts to yell just like old Cogs did, but his restraints aren't released. Instead, they send electric currents through Gunslinger for about 10 minutes. Then the guards come to check on him and see if he's not dead, and they check on Spawn also, because now he's playing possum. And when one of those guards get close, Spawn's symbiote cuts through him, and then hundreds of pounds of chains smash both his and Gunslinger's restraints. And then Gunslinger picks up the guns and he starts opening fire and quickly clears out this room. Then Gunslinger tells Spawn to go, but Spawn still needs to find Cygor. But Gunslinger tells him that there's no time, and then he shoots Spawn, sending him into the shadows. And then he follows behind him. Then we see that these guys have teleported into the jungle, miles away from the island. Then we transition back to Cogliostro, and he's in the pit, and we see that he now has the final pieces needed to complete his puzzle. That stolen bullet and a shard of stone from the wall. Then we're told that he had to come to this island had to become a prisoner so that he can send a signal into the darkness, asking that darkness to bring him power from the future. And that victim was Omega Spawn. But for that to happen, the darkness created in the past needed to take form. Thus was born Plague Spawn. All that was now needed was to obtain a tiny piece from a present-day Spawn, and Gunslinger Spawn's bullet became that piece, as we see Cog start cutting himself with that shard. Then we transition to a guy that's on his laptop, and he's talking with his kids, and he's showing them some gifts that he made for them. Then he tells his kids goodnight, and then he speaks to his wife, and he lets her know that he misses them, and he should be back home in about 10 days. And then they wish each other goodnight, and then hang up. Then we see that this guy is a crewman named Thomas Miller, and he's working on a ship out in the ocean. But then later on that evening, an emergency signal starts to go off. And then another crew member comes into his room and lets him know that he's needed. They're taking on water and don't know why. So Thomas decides to use the starboard exit to escape, which works. But when he opens the door, he quickly realizes that it's game over for him, and he'll never see his family again. As we now see a vortex open up in the water, and all 214 members of the crew are now gone forever. And from that vortex, we see a man flying out, and we're then told that the name Cogliostro dies tonight. And from this moment forward, the world, the entire universe, will simply call him Sin. So y'all remember at the beginning of this issue, Cogliostro had a plan. So now we see that plan coming to fruition. He's got some new power now. But then we're given a few short introductions to the other Hell Spawns before they come together. And we start off with Medieval Spawn, who's standing on a battlefield where his entire army had been slaughtered, and he wasn't there to protect them because he was off chasing pawns that served the heretic mages, and he thought they wanted him, but instead it was his men, and that miscalculation led all of them to their slaughter. Then we see that he's met with the person that did all of this, and this guy says to him, "We finally meet, Hellspawn. I hope you enjoyed the blood road I painted for you, because that road is going to become much longer and far bloodier. And if your bravery hasn't abandoned you yet, know this, I am not even close to the strongest in our cult. That honor belongs to our Lord and Savior, Cogliostro." Then we see Medieval Spawn leap in to battle this dragon that the guy rode in on, and is able to slay the dragon. But then this wizard, whose name is Tyrus, blasts Medieval with a mystic bow. And then we see Mark Rosen, who wakes up in the middle of the night and then sits at the edge of his bed shaking from the nightmare or vision that he just had. Then we transition to She-Spawn, Jessica Priest, who arrives in Lexington, Kentucky, with the thought of the words given to her by Spawn: "The moment they find out you care about anyone, they'll never be safe again." So before she heads off to war, she needs to go and say goodbye to her family. We see her meet up with her mother, who's shocked to see her and starts to give her a hard time about never being around. But Jessica doesn't have any time for any of that drama. She's just there to see her 5-year-old daughter, who thinks that Jessica is her aunt. So she asks her mother to call her daughter over from the playground, which she does. And the daughter is absolutely excited to see Jessica and immediately runs over to give her a hug. But Jessica keeps this meeting brief and just wants to let little Annie know that she loves her, and then sends her back to finish playing. Then Jessica lets her mother know that she needs her to take care of Annie, because after this, she's never coming back, because it's the only way that she can protect them. Then later that day, we see her vow that every one of her enemies will rue the day that Jessica Priest ever became She-Spawn. Then we see her suited up, and her look is just insanely dope, I gotta be honest. I really love her design. Then finally we transition over to Gunslinger Spawn, and the year is 1864, and his lifeless body is laying in the snow, rotting for nearly a year when he finally arises. And then his first act is to find his face that had been skinned right off of him before he can start his quest. Then we see his wolves have been circling around him, keeping his remains from being picked over, as if they knew that he would one day wake up again. He'd been pierced, slit, hanged, shot, and skinned. They knew, like their master, that a day of reckoning would soon be coming. And then he walks off and he calls the wolves to join him. And that, my friends, is the end of this issue. So you guys let me know in the comments what you guys thought about this issue. And if you want me to continue covering Spawn. Like I said in the beginning, I like to cover King Spawn, Gunslinger Spawn, and the Scorched going forward. And if you're unaware of the Scorched, it's basically a Spawn team-up series. Kind of like the Avengers, but with Spawns. But overall, I enjoyed this issue. Although there was some writing flaws in it. Like one time I can recall when the use of the word your was spelled YOU''RE instead of YOUR. But all in all, it was a fun experience. I haven't read a Spawn comic in years, so I've been behind in it big time. But my plan is to pick back up on that with the infamous upcoming issue number 350, when someone finally sits on Hell's empty throne. And like I said before, if those videos do well, then I'll keep going with issue breakdowns. But ladies and gentlemen, if you guys like this video and this channel, then you can be a tremendous help by donating to the channel with a super thanks. And if you're not able to do that, you can still help this channel out by dropping a like, share, and subscribing to Comics Icons for more icons in the comic book world. But ladies and gentlemen, it's about that time. I'm out. Peace.